Holly with Stella Mari's Quilts. Welcome to our series on 50 blocks for 50 states, following along with the designs from this book. Description box below has more information about that, as well as the link to the pattern with the step-by-step instructions that we've written that include any adaptations we've made. Today's block is the block for the state of Montana. So go ahead and grab your cup of tea and let's get started.
For the Montana block, we're going to need 2 5-inch squares of our light and 2 5-inch squares of our dark. We're going to need 4 5 by 2 1/4 inch rectangles of our dark. We're going to need 4 1.5 by 5-inch rectangles strips of our medium, as well as 4 of our light. We're going to need 5 2-inch squares of our medium and 4 of our light, and then we're going to need 8 2 3/4 by 2 1/4 rectangles of our light. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the center unit, which is a 9 patch, and for that we're going to need our 2-inch squares of both our medium and our light. So we'll just lay out that unit just like that. And I'll go ahead and sew this together. I'll sew this rows each together. I'll press everything towards the dark. That way, when putting the rows together, the seams will nest nicely. And then I'll sew the rows together. And here's our finished 9 patch. The next thing we're going to do is make some half square triangle units. So I'm going to take my 2 light 5-inch squares and I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner on the back of each of them. By doing this in a 2 at a time method, we're going to keep the outer sides of the half square triangle as the straight grain versus the bias, and that'll help with keeping everything nice and straight as we're putting this together. So I'll pair each one of these with a dark, and then I'm going to sew on both sides of the drawn line. Now that I've sewn on both sides of the line, I'm going to go ahead and use my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to trim these apart right down the center. And that will give me 2 half square triangles for each of the squares that I started with. And we will need to trim these up to, I believe it's 4 1/4. So I normally use a clearly perfect slotted trimmer to trim my half square triangles, but I don't have one that is in the 1/4 inch increments. I do believe they make one. I just haven't purchased it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and press these open, and then I'll come back and use a square to do the trimming. All right, so I've gone ahead and pressed these. I went ahead and pressed my seams open so that my ruler will lay flat on the block. If you have a block lock, then you would want to leave it pressed to one side so that it'll lock in place to help you with your trimming. I don't have one. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that my 45-degree line right here is lined up right on the center, and that I have plenty of space to trim that 1/4 inch all the way around, and my 4 1/4 is going to fit nicely on here. I'll just flip it around. This time I'm going to line up my 4 1/4 measurement along the edge that I've already trimmed, keeping that 45-degree line nice and centered along my stitch line there. And there's my first one trimmed up. So I'll go ahead and trim all 4, and then we'll move on to the next unit. For our next unit, we're going to start with a unit that's going to look like a flying geese, only it's a little bit more elongated. So this is going to be your 5 by 2 1/4 inch rectangle, and then you're going to need 2 each of your 2 1/4 by 2 3/4 inch rectangles of your light. I'm going to flip those over to the back, and I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner diagonally, one of them starting at the top left and going to the bottom right, and the other going from the top right to the bottom left. Then I'm going to take my rectangle here and I'm going to put my light so it's kind of like an L here, and I'm going to rotate it until the point meets the edge of the rectangle. So then I'm going to go ahead and sew on the line from corner to corner here. I might even sew just a hair on the right side of that line just to give a little bit more space. Then when I press this back, if I have it lined up right, my light will then meet in the corners and be straight along the edge. That's the goal. So I'm going to do that on this side and then we'll come back. So you can see how I've done that. I've sewn just on the side of the line that was drawn and I've pressed this back. You can see how pressed back my edge here and my corner all meet, and then it follows the edge here. Once I've verified that, I can go ahead and trim away any excess fabric here. I can just trim it using my rotary cutter or a pair of scissors, whatever works better for you. And then I'm going to do the same process on the other side. So I'm going to put my corner of my drawn line into the corner of my dark so that I form a little bit of an L here, and then I'm just going to rotate it until the edge, the point's still in the corner here, and this point meets the edge, and then I'm going to sew along that drawn line. Now the second side's been sewn down, pressed back, and it's been trimmed. The next step is to add our, I'm going to grab a different one, that one needs to be pressed. Add the rest of the sides here for the unit. So we're just going to stack these together. I'm going to first sew these two together, then I'll go ahead and press it towards the dark. Then I will sew the triangle flying geese unit to this set, and I will probably press it to the red fabric just so that there's less bulk at the points here. We're going to need 4 of these units. Now that we have all of the units for our block, we are going to go ahead and lay the whole thing out. So we've got our 9 patch in the center, and we have our flying geese units off to the sides, and our half square triangles with the dark pointing towards the center in all of our corners. I'm just going to sew this together just like a regular 9 patch. I'll sew the rows individually together and then also the rows together. And here's the completed Montana block.
Thank you for joining me today working on the block for Montana. I hope you enjoyed this, and you make sure to subscribe so that you'll be notified the next time one of the blocks is released in the series. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until next time, cheers and happy quilting.